to the resurrection based upon a statement made elsewhere in Scripture that's not specifically on that subject to be his primary foundation? Why is it that when I hear synergists, anti-reform folks, Arminians, if you want to use that term, dealing or attempting to deal with the subject of the atonement, they don't go to the extended discussions of the specific intention of Father, Son, and Spirit in the act of atonement itself, to start there, and then once you've laid a foundation from those central passages, then look at references that are made in passing elsewhere in Scripture. In other words, follow the old dictum that the clear passages interpret the unclear passages. I mean, he wouldn't allow that to happen on key issues like the resurrection or the deity of Christ. So why then do it here? Why not show an understanding of the depth and power of the Reformed understanding of the teaching of the Scriptures on this subject? And so before I look at the rest of what Craig had to say, I feel like I need to illustrate that. I need to spend some time today looking at a couple of texts and reminding us of what the real issues are here. Because I'll be honest with you, if you have a real understanding of what the key issue in regards to the subject of the atonement is in Scripture, then you will actually eventually become somewhat frustrated with and I'm going to take some heat for this, but the shallow nature of the argumentation coming from the other side. And you'll be able to recognize that they can't just dive into key texts on this subject and lay a deep biblical foundation. Instead, when you look at these books, what you get is a bunch of either theology or philosophy creating a system up here before you ever get to the application in texts. You know, we saw that in a very, very similar vein with the Soteriology 101 thing, where they did the hit piece on me in regards to Acts 13:48. You establish all this other stuff before you ever get to the text, rather than being able to say, well, you know what? Let's go directly into the text and let's see when the Scriptures are specifically talking about this subject, what they say. And then we can draw our perspective out from that. So obviously, I think some of the most profound, powerful teaching on this, and I'm repeating some of this stuff, and some of you who've listened for a long time are going, you're repeating yourself. Yeah, but we have a lot of new listeners all the time, a lot of new viewers all the time, especially since this Hebrew Israelite stuff has taken off. There's a lot of folks that are listening, and so if I repeat a few things, I apologize for that, but it's good for reminding, and it's good for the new folks that are joining us. But I've often said that, unfortunately, for many Christians, their theology of the cross is sentimental rather than biblical. It's, and I appreciate this. One of my earliest memories of anything to have to do with the cross was George Beverly Shea singing "The Old Rugged Cross." And I'm thankful for that music. I'm thankful for that memory. I'm thankful for being raised in that context. But I have to recognize that, I think on that, there was one, and few young folks, look it up on Google, LP, made of, as I showed the word for the first time to my daughter years ago, she goes, "What's vinyl?" I hear you laughing, Marty. Studio audience of one hiding in the background there. But it was the old vinyl LP. Sorry, Summer, but it's a good story. And on the same record with the Old Rugged Cross was, what is that song? In the Garden, is it called In the Garden? And let's just say it's pretty sappy sentimentalism, and it's not really good theology. But again, it's what I grew up with. And I have learned that I have to examine those things. We all do. And I can, unlike the emergent church folks that just throw everything off, remember when I talked with the guy whose name I can never remember. I think I have a hard drive with a bad sector in it, because when I try to remember Brian McLaren's name, there it is. When I try to remember Brian McLaren's name, it's just, it doesn't work. Remember the conversation I had with him on Unbelievable about, 4 years ago now? 4 or 5 years ago? Here's a guy who had a very similar upbringing to me. When I read his books, he was talking about his, as a 5-year-old boy, his black pants and his brightly shined black leather shoes and his white shirt and his bow tie. I've got pictures of me like that. I remember one of those shiny white shirts that I wore at one of those, what'd you call the New Year's Eve services? Where, in the old independent fundamentalist Baptist context, you'd meet on New Year's Eve to, bring the year in prayer, and normally watch some type of scary eschatological movie or something like that too. And I remember so clearly trying to stay awake in the corner of an uncomfortable pew, around 5 years of age, maybe 6 or 7, somewhere around there. And so when I'm reading McLaren's book, I'm going, hey, that was me, man. How do we get to such completely different places? Well, we both learned that you have to make your faith your own. You have to examine it. You have to see how deep your understanding really is. And if there's traditions, you need to examine your traditions. The difference between me and McLaren is he figured you do that with everything. So the Trinity, the Bible, the nature of the gospel, the nature of sanctification, everything goes on the table, and everybody just gets to reinvent the wheel. And I recognize that's silly. That's impossible. You can't. No one can reinvent the wheel every generation. That's not that is an imbalanced way of doing it. And so I held on to that which is true, and that which is historical, and that which is thoroughly biblical, and what I could defend using a consistent biblical hermeneutic. And it's not on this issue, but on certain issues,